Duryodhana said, "For what reason wilt thou not slay Sihiki hunting, even if thou beholdest him approach thee in as afore with arms upraised? Thou hast formerly told me, I will slay the Pankhalas with the Somakas. Tell me." Bhishma said, "Listen to this history with all these lords of earth as to why I will not slay Sihiki hunting, even if I behold him impatedly. My father, Santanu, was celebrated over all the world. That king of virtuous soul paid his debt to nature in time. Observing my pledge, I then installed my brother, Hitrangada, on the throne of the extensive kingdom of the Kurus. After Hitrangada, the Miss, obedient to the counsels of Satyavati, are installed according to the ordinance Hitraviriya as king. Although young in age, yet being installed duly by me, the virtuous Hitraviriya looked up to me in everything. Desirous of marrying him, I set my heart upon procuring doctors from a suitable family. I heard that 3 maidens are unrivaled for beauty, daughters of the ruler of Kasi, by name Amba, Ambika, and Amvalika, would select husbands for themselves, and that all the kings of the earth had been invited. Amongst those maidens, Amba was the eldest, Ambika the second, while the prince Amvalika was the youngest. Myself appearing on a single car to the seat of the ruler of Kasi, I beheld the 3 maidens adorned with ornaments, and all the kings of the earth invited thither on the occasion. Then, challenging to battle all those kings who were ready for the encounter, I took up those maidens on my car, and repeatedly said unto all the kings assembled there these words: Bhishma, the son of Santanu, is carrying away by force these maidens. Ye kings, strive ye out the best of your power for rescuing them. By force do I take them away. Ye bulls among men, making you spectators of my act. At these words of mine, those rulers of the earth sprang up with weapons unsheathed, and they angrily urged the drivers of their cars, saying, Make ready the cars. And those monarchs sprang up to the rescue with weapons unsheathed. Car warriors on their cars resembling masses of clowns, those fighting from elephants on their elephants, and others on their stout and plump steeds. Then all those kings surrounded me on all sides with a multitudinous number of cars. With a shower of arrows, I stopped there on a hoosh on all sides and vanquished them like the chief of the Celestials vanquishing hordes of the Navas. Laughingly, with easiness, I cut down the variegated standards, decked with gold, of the advancing kings, with blazing shafts. In that combat, I overthrew their steeds and elephants and car drivers, each with a single arrow. Beholding that likeness of mine, they desisted and broke, and having vanquished all those rulers of the earth, I came back to Hastinapura. I then made over those maidens, intending them for my brothers, to Satyavati, and represented unto her everything I had done. Then, approaching my mother, that daughter of the Dasa clan, and saluting that parent of heroes, I said these words: Having vanquished all the kings, these daughters of the ruler of the Kasi, having beauty alone for their dowry, have been abducted by me for the sake of Vikhitravirya. Then Satyavati, with eyes bathed in tears, smelled my head and joyously said, "By good luck it is that thou hast triumphed." When next with Satyavati acquiescence the nuptials approached, the elves doctor of the ruler of Kasi said these words in great bashfulness. Thou art conversant with morality, and art well versed in our scriptures. Hearing my words, it behoveth thee to do towards me that which is consistent with morality. The ruler of the Salvas was before this mentally chosen by me as my lord. By him, without my father's knowledge, was privately solicited. How once thou, born special as thou art in Kuruheis, transgress the laws of morality, and cause on that longeth for another to live in thy abode. Knowing this, and deliberating in thy mind, it behoveth thee to accomplish what is proper. It is clear that the ruler of the Salvas waiteth. It behoveth thee, therefore, to permit me to depart. Be merciful to me. Thou art devoted to truth. It is well known all over the earth. Bhishma said, I then placed the matter before Kali, otherwise called Gandhihavati, as also our counselors, and before our special and ordinary priests, and then permitted the elves of those maidens, Amba, to depart. Permitted by me, that maiden then went to the seat of the ruler of the Salvas, and she had for her escort a number of old Brahmanas, and was accompanied by her own nurse. And having travelled the whole distance, she approached King Salva and said these words, I come expectant of thee. To her, the Lord of the Salvas said with a laughter, Thou of the fairest complexion, I no longer desire to make a wife of thee who wast to be wedded to another. Therefore, go back thither unto Bhishma's presence. I no longer desire thee that was possibly ravished by Bhishma. When Bhishma, having vanquished the kings, took thee away, thou didst go with him cheerfully. When, having humiliated and vanquished all the kings of the earth, Bhishma took thee away, I no longer desire thee for a wife, thee that was to have been wedded to another. How can a king like myself, who is acquainted with all branches of knowledge and who lays down laws for the guidance of others, admit a woman who was to have been wedded to another? Go whithersoever thou wishest, without spending thy time in vain. Hearing these words of his, Amba, then, afflicted with the arrows of the god of love, addressed Salva, saying, Say not so, for it is not so. Cheerful I was not when taken away by Bhishma. He took me away by force, having halted other kings, and I was weeping all the while. An innocent girl that I am and attached to thee, accept me. The abandonment of those that are attached is never applauded in the scriptures. Having solicited Ganga's son, who never retreats from battery, and having at last obtained his permission, I come to thee. The might-armed Bhishma desireth me not. It hath been heard by me that his action hath been for the sake of his brother, my two sisters, Amvika and Amvalika, who were abducted with me at the same time, have been bestowed by Ganga's son on his younger brother, Vikitraviriya. I swear by touching my own head that I have never talked of any other husband than thee. I do not come to thee as one who was to have been wedded to another. I tell thee the truth, truly swearing by my soul. Take me, thou of large eyes, a maiden come to thee for her own accord, on unbetrothed to another, undesirous of thy grace. Our talk, she spoke in this strain. Salva, however, rejected that doctor of the ruler of Cassi, like a snake casting off his slough. Our talk, that king was earnestly solicited with diverse expressions, such as these. The lord of the Salvas still did not manifest an inclination for accepting the girl. Then the else doctor of the ruler of the castle, filled with anger, and her eyes bathed in tears, said these words with a voice shocked with tears and grief. Cast off by thee, whithersoever I may go, the righteous will be my protectors, for truth is indestructible. If thus that the lord of the Salvas rejected that maiden who addressed him in language such as this, and who was sobbing in grief so tenderly, go where the words that Salva said unto her repeatedly. I am in terror of vitima, thou of fair hips, thou art vitima captur. Thus addressed by Salva, destitute of foresight, that maiden ensued out of his seat, sorrowful and wailing like a she osprey. Vitima said, ensuing out of the seat, Amba reflected sorrowful in this strain. There is not in the whole world a young woman in such a miserable plight as I. Destitute of friends, I am rejected by Salva. I cannot go back to the seat named after an elephant, for I was permitted by Vitima to leave that seat, expectant of Salva. Whom then shall I blame? Myself, or the invincible Vitima, or that foolish father of mine who made arrangements for my self-choice? Perhaps it is my own fault. Why did I not leap down before from Vitima car when that fierce battle took place for coming to Salva? That I am so afflicted now, as if deprived of my senses, is the fruit of that omission of mine. Cursed be Vitima, cursed be my own wretched father of foolish understanding, who had arranged prowess to be my dower, sending me out as if I were a woman for a consideration. Cursed be myself, cursed be King Salva himself, and cursed be my Creator too. Cursed be they through whose fault such great misery hath been mine. Human beings always suffer what is destined for them. The cause, however, of my present affliction is Vitima, the son of Santanu. Therefore see that at present my vengeance should fall upon him, either through ascetic austerities or by battle, for he is the cause of my woe. But what king is there that would venture to vanquish Vitima in battle? Having settled this, she ensued out of the seat for repairing to an asylum of the high-souled ascetics of virtuous deeds. The night she stayed there, surrounded by those ascetics, and that lady of sweet smiles told those ascetics all that had happened to herself with the minutest details, about her abduction and her rejection by Salva. There lived in that asylum an eminent Brahmana of rigid vows, and his name was Saiki Havatia, endowed with ascetic merit of a high order. He was a preceptor of the scriptures and the Aranyakas, and the sage Shaiki Havatia, of great ascetic merit, addressed that afflicted maiden, that chaste girl, sighing heavily in grief, and said, if it have been so, what can high solid ascetics residing in their retreats and engaged in penances do? That maiden, however, answered him, saying, let mercy be shown to me, a desire alive in the woods, having announced the word, I will practice the severest of ascetic austerities. That I now suffer is certainly the fruit of those things that I have committed from ignorance in my former life. I do not venture to go back to my relatives, ye ascetics, dejected and shelterless that I am, knowing that I have been humiliated by Salva, ye that have washed away your sins, godlike as ye are. A desire that ye should instruct me in ascetic penance. Let mercy be shown to me. Thus addressed, that sage then comforted the maiden by examples and reasons borrowed from the scriptures, and having consoled her thus, he promised, with the other Brahmanas, to do what she desired. Vitima said, those virtuous ascetics then set themselves about their usual avocations, thinking all the while as to what they should do for that maiden, and some amongst them said, let her be taken to her father's abode, and some amongst them set their hearts upon reproaching ourselves, and some talked that, appearing to the ruler of the Salvas, he should be solicited to accept the maiden, and some said, no, that should not be done, for she hath been rejected by him. And after some time had passed thus, those ascetics of rigid vows once more said unto her, what can ascetics with senses under control do? Do not devote thyself to a life in the woods, announcing the word. Listen to these words that are beneficial to thee. Depart hence, blessed be thou, to thy father's mansion. The king, thy father, will do what should next be done. Surrounded by every comfort, thou mayest live there in happiness. Thou art a woman, at present, therefore, thou hast no other protector, save thy father. Thou of the fairest complexion, as regards a woman, she hath her father for her protector, or her husband. Her husband is her protector when she is in comfortable circumstances, but when plunged in misery, she hath her father for her protector. Our life in the woods is exceedingly painful, especially to one that is delicate. Thou art a prince by birth, over this thou art again very delicate. There are numerous discomforts and difficulties attaching to a life in a retreat, none of which shalt thou have to bear in thy father's abode. Other ascetics, beholding that helpless girl, said to her, seeing thee alone in deep and solitary woods, kings may court thee. Therefore set not thy heart upon such a course. Hearing these words, Amba said, I am incapable of going back to my father's abode in the seat of castle, for without doubt I shall then be disregarded by all my relatives. Ye ascetics, I lived there in my father's abode during my childhood. I cannot, however, now go to thither where my father is. Protected by the ascetics, I desire to practice ascetic austerities, so that in even future life of mine such sore afflictions may not be mine. Ye best of ascetics, I desire, therefore, to practice ascetic austerities. When those Brahmanas were thinking thus about her, there came into that forest that best of ascetics, the royal sage Hotravahana. Then those ascetics reverenced the king with worship, increase of welcome and courtesy, a seat in water, and after he was seated and had rested for a while, those denizens of the forest once more began to address that maiden in the hearing of that royal sage, hearing the history of Amba and the king of Kasi. That royal sage of great energy became very anxious at heart, hearing her speak in that strain, and beholding her, that royal sage of rigid austerities, the high-souled Hotravahana, was filled with pity. Then that maternal grandsire of her rose up with trembling frame, and causing that maiden to sit on his lap, began to comfort her. He then inquired of her in details about that distress of hers from its beginning, and she thereupon represented to him minutely all that had happened. Hearing all she said, the royal sage was filled with pity and grief, and that great sage settled in mind what she would do. Trembling from agitation, he addressed the afflicted maiden sunk in woe, saying, "Do not go back to thy father abode. I am the father of thy mother. I will dispel thy grief. Rail on me. Great must thy affliction be when thou art so emaciated. At my advice, go unto the ascetic Hama, the son of Jamadagni. Hama will dispel this great affliction and grief of thine. He will slay Bhisma impatiently if the latter obeyeth not his behest. Go, therefore, unto that foremost one of Bihirigu race, who resembleth the Yuga fire itself in energy. That great ascetic will place thee once more on the right track." Hearing this, that maiden, shedding tears all the while, saluted her maternal grandsire, Hotravahana, with a bend of her head, and addressed him, saying, "Go, I will at thy command, but shall I succeed in obtaining a sight of that reverend sire, celebrated over the world? How will he dispel this poignant grief of mine, and how shall I go to that descendant of Bihirigu? I desire to know all these." Hotravahana said, "Thou wilt behold Jamadagni's son, Hama, who is devoted to truth and endowed with great might, and engaged in austere penances in the great forest. Hama always dwelleth in that foremost of the mountains called Mahendra. Men rishis, learned in the Vedas, and men Gandharvas and Apsaras dwell there. Go, blessed be thou, and tell him these words of mine." Having saluted with thy bent head that sage of rigid vows and great ascetic merit, tell him all that thou seekest. If thou namest me, Hama will do everything for thee. For Hama, the heroic son of Jamadagni, that foremost of all bearers of arms, is a friend of mine, highly pleased with me, and always wisheth me well. And while King Hotravahana was saying all this unto that maiden, thither appeared Akritavarana, a dear companion of Hama, and on his advent those mornings, Bahandras and the Srinjaya king Hotravahana, awed in ears, all stood up, and those denizens of the forest, uniting with one another, did him all the rites of hospitality, and they all took their seats surrounding him, and filled with gratification and joy, they then started various delightful, laudable, and charming subjects of discourse, and after their discourse was over, that royal sage, the high-souled Hotravahana, inquired of Akritavana about Hama, that foremost of great sage, saying, Thou of might arms, where may that foremost of persons acquainted with the Vedas, Jamadagni, son of great prowess, be seen? Akritavana answered him, saying, Hama always speaketh of thee, saying, That royal sage of the joias is my dear friend. I believe Hama will be here tomorrow morning. Thou wilt see him even here when he cometh to behold thee. As regards this maiden, for what hath she come to the wood? Whose is she, and what is she to thee? I desire to know all this. Hotravahana said, The favorite daughter of the ruler of Kasi she is, my daughter child. The eldest daughter of the king of Kasi, she is known by the name of Amba, along with her two younger sisters. She was in the midst of her Sivayamvara ceremonies. The names of her two younger sisters are Amvika and Amvalika. All the Kshatriya kings of the earth were assembled together at the seat of Kasi, and great festivities were going on there on account of these maidens. In the midst of these, Santanuson, Bhisma of might valor, disregarding all the kings, abducted the girls, vanquishing all the monarchs. The poor-souled Prince Bhisma of Viharata then reached Hastinapura, and, representing everything unto Satyavati, ordered his brother Vikitraviriya marriage to take place with the girls he had brought. Beholding the arrangements for those nuptials complete, this maiden then addressed Ganga son in the presence of his ministers, and said, I have within my heart chosen the Lord of the Salvas to be my husband. Conversant as thou art with morality, it behoveth thee not to bestow me on thy brother, whose heart is given away to another. Hearing these words of hers, Bhisma took counsel with his ministers. Deliberating on the matter, he at last, with Satyavati consent, dismissed this maiden, permitted thus by Bhisma. This girl gladly repaired to Salva, the lord of Saubiha, and approaching him said, Dismissed I have been by Bhisma. See that I do not fall off from righteousness. In my heart I have chosen thee for my lord. Salva, however, rejected her, suspecting the purity of her conduct. Even she hath come to these woods, sacred for ascetics, being ardently inclined to devote herself to ascetic penances. She was recognized by me from the account that she gave of her parentage. As regards her sorrow, Bhisma is considered by her to be its root. After Hotravahana had ceased, Amba herself said, It is even so as this Lord of earth, this author of my mother body, Hotravahana of the Srinjaya race, have said, I cannot venture to go back to my own seat, for shame and fear of disgrace. At present, even this is what hath been my determination. That would be my highest duty, which the whole Hama might point out to me. Akritavrana said, Of these two afflictions of thine, for which dost thou seek a remedy? Tell me these. Is it thy wish that the Lord of Saubiha should be urged to wed thee? The high-souled Hama will certainly urge him from desire of doing thee good. Or if thou wishest to behold Ganga's son, Bhisma, defeated impatiently by intelligent Hama, Viharagava will gratify even that wish of thine. Hearing what Srinjaya has to say, and what thou may have to say, let that be settled this very day, what should be done for thee. Hearing these words, Amba said, abducted I was by Bhisma, acting from ignorance, for Bhisma knew not that my heart had been given away to Salva. Thinking of this in thy mind, let that be resolved upon by thee which is consistent with justice, and let steps be taken for accomplishing that resolution. Do that which is proper to be done towards either the tiger among the Kurus, Bhisma, singly, or towards the ruler of the Salvas, or towards both of them. I have told thee truly about the root of my grief. It behoveth thee to do that which is consistent with reason. Akritavrana said, this that thou sayest with eyes fixed upon virtue is worthy of thee. Listen, however, to what I say. If Ganga's son had never taken thee to the seat called after the elephant, then Salva would have at Hama behest taken thee on his head. It is because Bhisma bore thee away by force that King Salva suspicions have been awakened in respect of thee. Bhisma is proud of his manliness and is crowned with success. Therefore, thou shouldst cause thy vengeance to fall upon Bhisma. Hearing these words of the sage, Amba said, this desire hath been cherished by me in my heart, that, if possibly, Bhisma should be caused by me to be slain in battle. Be it Bhisma, or be it King Salva, punish that man whom thou thinkest to be guilty and rogue, whose act I have been so miserable. In conversations such as this, that day passed in the night also, with its delicious breeze, which was neither cold nor hot. Then Hama appeared there, beaming with energy, and that sage, wearing matted locks on his head, and attired in deer skins, was surrounded by his disciples, and endowed with magnanimous soul. He had his bow in hand, and bearing a sword and a battle axe, that Singla's own, approached the Srinjaya king in that forest. And the ascetics dwelling there, and that king also, who was endowed with great ascetic merit, beholding him, I stood up and waited, with joined hands, and that helpless maiden, too, did the same. And they all cheerful worshipped Viharagava with the offer of honey and curds. Being worshipped dull by them, Hama sat with them seated round him. Then Jamadagni's son and Hotravahana, seated thus together, began to discourse. And after their discourse was over, the sage Hotravahana opportunely said in a sweet voice these words of grave import unto that foremost one of Bihirgu race, Hama of might strength. This is my doctor's doctor. Being the doctor of the king of Kasi, she hath something to be done for her. Listen to it duly, thou that art skilled in our tasks. Hearing these words of his friend, Hama addressed that maiden, saying, tell me what thou hast to say. At these words, Amba approached Hama, who assembled a blazing fire, and worshipping both his feet with her bent head, touched them with her two hands that assembled in radiance a couple of lotuses, and stood silently before him. And filled with grief, she wept aloud, her eyes bathed in tears, and she then sought the protection of that descendant of Bihirigu, who was the refuge of all distressed persons, and Hama said, "Tell me what grief is in thy heart, I will act according to thy words." Thus encouraged, Amba said, "Today I seek thy protection. Raise me from this unfathomable ocean of sorrow." Beholding her beauty and her youthful body and its great delicacy, Hama began to think, "What will she say?" And that perpetrator of beautiful line, thinking inwardly of this, sat long in silence, filled with pity. He then addressed that maiden of sweet smiles, again saying, "Tell us what thou hast to say." Thus encouraged, she represented everything truly unto Biharagava, and Jamadagni son, hearing these words of the prince, and having first settled what he should do, addressed that damsel of the fairest complexion, saying, "I will send word unto Bihisma, that foremost one of Kuru Haze. Having heard what my behest is, that king will certainly obey it. If the son of Janhavi do not act according to my words, I will then consume him immediately with all his counsellors, or if thou desirest it, I may even address the heroic ruler of the Salvas to the matter in hand." Hearing these words of Hama, Amba said, dismissed I was by Bihisma, as soon as he heard that my heart had previously been freely given away to the ruler of the Salvas. Approaching then the lord of Saubiha, I addressed him in language that was unbecoming. Doubtful of the purity of my conduct, he refused to accept me. Reflecting on all this with the aid of thy own understanding, it behoveth thee to do that which should be done in view of these circumstances. Bihisma, however, of great vows, is the root of my calamity, for he brought me under his power, taking me up by violence. Slay that Bihisma, for whose sake, overwhelmed with such distress, I suffer such poignant misery. Bihisma is covetous and mean and proud of his victory, and therefore thou shouldst give him his deserts, while I was being abducted by him. Even this was the desire that I cherished in my heart, that I should cause that hero of great vows to be slain. Therefore, gratify this desire of mine. Slay Bihisma, even as Purandara slew Vritra. Bihisma said, repeatedly urged by that maiden to slay Bihisma, Hama replied unto that weeping girl, saying, "I do not, on an account, take up arms now, except for the sake of those that are conversant with the Vedas. Tell me, therefore, what else I can do for thee." Both Bihisma and Salva are exceedingly obedient to me. Do not grieve, I will accomplish thy object. I will not, however, take up arms, except at the command of Brahmanas. This hath been my rule of conduct. Amba said, "My misery should by any means be dispelled by thee. That misery of mine hath been caused by Bihisma. Slay him without much delay." Hama said, "Say but the word, and Bihisma, however deserving of reverence from thee, will at my word take up thy fee on his head." Amba said, "Slay immediately that Bihisma, who hovereth like an azure, summoned to the encounter. Slay him, if thou wishest what is agreeable to me. It behoveth thee, besides, to make thy promise true." While Hama and Amba were talking thus with each other, the Rish of highly virtuous soul, say these words. It behoveth thee not to desert this girl that seeketh thy protection. If summoned to battle, vitima cometh to the encounter, and saith, I am vanquished, or if he obeyeth thy words, then that which this maiden seeketh will be accomplished, and the words spoken by thee will be true. This was the vow then made by thee, the vow made by thee before Brahmanas, after thou hast conquered all the Kshatriyas, that thou wouldst lay in battle the person, be he a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, a Vaisya, or a Sudra, who would be a foe to the Brahmanas. Thou hast further promised that as long as thou wouldst live, thou wouldst not abandon those that would come to thee in fright and seek thy protection, and that thou wouldst slay that proud warrior who would vanquish in battle all the assembled Kshatriyas of the earth. Even Bhisma, that perpetuator of Kuru race, hath achieved such success. Approaching him, encounter him now in battle. Hama said, I have collected that vow of mine made before. I will, however, do that which conciliation may point out. The task which the doctor of Kasi hath in her mind is a grave one. Taking this maiden with me, I will repair myself to the place where Bhisma is. If Bhisma, proud of his achievements in battle, do not obey my behest, I will then slay that arrogant wight. Even this is my fixed resolve. The arrows shot by me do not stick to the bodies of embodied creatures. This is known to you from what you saw in my encounters with the Kshatriyas. Having said this, Rama then, along with all those seekers of Brahma, resolved to depart from that asylum, and the great ascetic then rose from his seat. Then all those ascetics passing that night there performed their Homa rites and recited their prayers, and then they all set out, desirous of taking my life. And Hama, accompanied by all those devotees of Brahma, then came to Kurukshetra with that maiden in their company, and those high-souled ascetics with that foremost one of Bihirigu race at head, having arrived on the banks of the stream of Sarasvati, quartered themselves there. Bhisma said, after he had quartered there on third day, Jamadagni's son of high vows sent a message to me, saying, I have come here, do what is agreeably to me. Hearing that Hama of great might had come to the confines of our kingdom, I speedily went with a joyous heart to that master who was an ocean of energy, and I went to him with a coal placed in the van of my train, and accompanied by many Brahmanas and priests, and by others resembling the very gods in splendor, employed by us on special occasions. And beholding me arrived at his presence, Jamadagni's son of great prowess accepted the worship I offered unto him, and said these words unto me. Hama said, thyself divested of desire, with what of mode mind didst thou abduct on the occasion of her self-choice, his daughter of the king of Kasi, and again dismiss her subsequently? But thee hath this famous lady been dissociated from virtue, contaminated by the touch of thy hands before. Who can marry her now? Rejected she hath been by Salva, because thou hadst abducted her. Take her therefore to thyself, at my command. Let this daughter of a king be charged with the duties of her sex. It is not proper that this humiliation should be hers. Seeing him plunged into sorrow, I said unto him, I cannot by any means bestow this girl on my brother. It was to myself that she said, I am Salva, and it was by me that she was permitted to go to Salva city. As regards myself, even this is my firm vow, that I cannot abandon Kishatria praxis from fear or pity, or avarice of wealth, or lust. Hearing these words of mine, Hama addressed me with eyes rolling in anger, saying, If thou dost not act according to my words, I will slay thee this very day along with all thy counselors. With eyes rolling in anger, Hama, in great wrath, told me these words repeatedly. I, however, then beseeched him in sweet words, but Thog, beseeched by me, he did not cool down. Bowing down with my head unto that best of Brahmanas, I then inquired of him the reason for which he talked baitly with me. I also said, Thou of might arms, while I was a shield, it was thou who instructed me in the 4 kinds of arms. I am, therefore, thy disciple. Then Hama answered me with eyes hid in anger, Thou knowest me to be thy preceptor, and yet thou acceptest not, for pleasing me, this daughter of the ruler of Kasi. I cannot be gratified unless thou actest in this way. Take this maiden and preserve thy haste. Having been abducted by thee, she obtaineth not a husband. Unto Hama, that subjugator of hostile cities, I replied, saying, This cannot be, all thy labor is vain. Remembering thy old preceptorship, I am striving to gratify thee. As regards this maiden, she hath been refused by me before. Knowing what the faults productive of great evils of the female sex are, who is there that would admit into his abode a woman whose heart is another, and who is even like a snake of virulent poison? I would not, even from fear of Vasava, forsake duty. Be gracious unto me, or do me without delay that which thou hast thought proper. This is Loka also is heard in the Puranas, sung by the high-souled Maruta. The renunciation is sanctioned by the ordinance of a preceptor who is filled with vanity, who is destitute of the knowledge of right and wrong, and who is treading in a devious path. Thou art my preceptor, and it is for this that I have from love reverenced thee greatly. Thou knowest not the duty of a preceptor, and it is for this that I will fight with thee. I would not slay my preceptor impatiently, especial again a Brahmana, and more especial one endowed with ascetic merit. It was for this that I forgive thee. It is well known truth, gathered from the scriptures, that he is not guilty of slaying a Brahmana who killeth impatiently a person of that order, that taketh up weapons like a Kshatriya and fighteth wrathful without seeking to fly. I am a Kshatriya, stationed in the practice of a Kshatriya duties, and doth not incur sin, nor doth one incur in harm by behaving towards a person exactly as that person deserveth. When a person acquainted with the proprieties of time and place, and well versed in the matters affecting both property and virtue, feels doubtful as regards anything, he should, without scruples of any kind, devote himself to the acquisition of virtue, which would confer the highest benefit on him. And sighs thou in the matter connected with property of doubtful propriety, actest unrighteously. I will certainly fight with thee in a great battle. Behold the strength of my arms, and my prowess that is superhuman. In view of such circumstances, I shall certainly do what I can. I shall fight with thee on the field of Kurukshetra. Equip thyself as thou listest for single combat. Come and station thyself on the field of Kurukshetra, where, afflicted with my shafts in great battle, and sanctified by my weapons, thou mayest obtain those regions that have been won by thee. There I will approach thee for battle, thee that art so fond of battle, there where in days of yore thou hast propitiated thy fathers. Slaying thee there, I will propitiate the Kshatriya slain by thee. Come there without delay. There, thou that art difficult of being vanquished, I will curb thy old pride about which the Brahmanas speak. For many long years thou hast boasted, saying, I have single-handed vanquished all the Kshatriya of the earth. Listen now to what enabled thee to indulge in that boast. In those days no Bhisma was born, or no Kshatriyas like unto Bhisma. Kshatriyas real endowed with valor have taken their births later on. As regards thyself, thou hast consumed on heaps of straw. The person that would easily quell thy pride of battle have since been born. He is no other than myself, even Bhisma, that subjugator of hostile cities. Without doubt, I shall just quell thy pride of battle. Hearing these words of mine, Rama addressed me laughingly, saying, By good luck it is that thou desirest to fight with me in battle. Even now I go with thee to Kurukshetra. I will do what thou hast said. Come thither, let thy mother, Janhavi, behold thee dead on that plain, pierced with my shafts, and become the food of vultures, crows, and other carnivorous birds. Let that goddess worshipped by Siddhas and Haranas, that blessed daughter of Bihagihatiha, in the form of a river, who begat thy wicked self, weep today, beholding thee slain by me and lying miserably on that plain, and deserving she may be of seeing such a sight. Come and follow me, take with thee thy cars and all other equipments of battle. Hearing these words of Rama, that subjugator of hostile towns, I worshipped him with a bend of my head, and answered him, saying, So be it. Having said all this, Rama then went to Kurukshetra from desire of combat, and I, entering our seat, represented everything unto Satyavati, then causing propitiatory ceremonies to be performed, and being blessed by my mother, and making the Brahmanas utter benedictions on me, I mounted on a handsome car made of silver, and unto which were yoked steeds white in hue, and every part of that car was well built, and it was exceedingly commodious, and covered on all sides with tiger skin, and it was equipped with many great weapons, and furnished with all necessaries, and it was ridden by a charioteer who was well born and brave, who was versed in horse lore, careful in battle, and well trained in his art, and who had seen many encounters. And I was accoutred in coat of mail, white in hue, and had my bow in hand, and the bow I took was white in hue, and thus equipped I set out, and an umbrella white in hue was held over my head, and I was fanned with fans that were white in color, and clad in white, with a white-haired gear. All my adornments were white, and eulogized by Brahmanas, wishing me victory, I issued out of the seat named after the elephant, and proceeded to Kurukshetra, which was to be the field of battle. And those steeds, fleet as the mind or the wind, urged by my charioteer, soon bore me to that great encounter, and arrived in the field of Kurukshetra. Both myself and Hama, eager for battle, became desirous of showing each other our prowess, and arrived within a view of the great ascetic Hama. I took up my excellent conch and blew a loud blast, and many Brahmanas and many ascetics having their abodes in the forest, as also the gods with Indra at their head, were stationed there for beholding the great encounter. And many celestial garlands, and diverse kinds of celestial music, and many cloud canopies could be not set there. And all those ascetics who had come with Hama, desiring to become spectators of the fight, stood all around the field, just as this juncture, my divine mother, devoted to the good of all creatures, appeared before me in her own form, and said, "What is this that thou seekest to do?" Referring to Jamadagni's son, I will repeatedly solicit him, saying, "Do not fight Bhisma, who is thy disciple. Being a Kshatriya, do not obstinately set thy heart on an encounter in battle with Jamadagni's son, who is a Brahmana." It was thus that she reproved me. And she said, "Equal in prowess unto Mahadeva himself is the exterminator of the Kshatriya order. It is not known to thee that thou desirest an encounter with him." Thus addressed by her, I saluted the goddess reverentially, and replied unto her with joined hands, giving her an account of all that had transpired in that self-choice. I told her everything about how I had urged Hama. I gave her a history of all the past acts of the daughter of Kasi. My mother, then the great river, winding to Hama, began, for my sake, to besiege the reach of Bihirigu race, and she said unto him these words, "Do not fight Bhisma, who is thy disciple." Hama said unto her while she was besieging him thus, "Go and make Bhisma desist. He doth not execute out my wish. It is for this that I have challenged him." Thus addressed by Hama, Ganga, from affection for her son, came back to Bhisma, but Bhisma, with eyes rolling in anger, refused to do her bidding. Just at this time, the mighty ascetic Hama, that foremost one of Bihirigu race, appeared in Bhisma sight, and then that the best of the twice born ones challenged him to the encounter. Bhisma said, then smiling addressed Rama, stationed for battle, saying, "Myself on my car, I do not wish to fight with thee that art on the earth. Mount on a car, and case thy body in mail, if thou wishest to fight me in battle." Then Hama, smiling, replied unto me on that field of battle, saying, "The earth is my car, and Vedas, like good steeds, are the animals that carry me. The wind is my car driver, and my coat of mail is constituted by those mothers in the Vedas. Well covered by these in battle, I will fight." Having said this, Hama, of prowess incapable of being baffled, covered me on all sides with a thick shower of arrows. I then beheld Jamadagni's son, stationed on a car equipped with every kind of excellent weapons, and the car he rode was exceedingly handsome and was of wonderful appearance, and it had been created by a fiat of his will, and it was beautiful like a town, and celestial steeds were yoked unto it, and it was well protected by the necessary defences, and it was decked all over with ornaments of gold, and it was well covered with tall skins all around, and bore the device of the sun and the moon. Hama was armed with bow and equipped with a quiver, and with fingers cased in leathern fences. Akrita Varana, the dear friend of Bhargava, well versed in the Vedas, did the duties of a car driver for that warrior, and he, of Vihirigu race, repeatedly summoning me to battle, saying, "Come, gladden my heart," and then myself singly obtained for my adversary that invincibly and might exterminator of the Kishatriya race, Hama, rising like the sun himself in splendor, desirous of fighting singly, and after he had poured 3 showers of arrows on me, curving my steeds, I came down from my car and placing my bow aside, I proceed on foot to that best of riches. And arriving before him, I worshipped the best of Brahmanas with reverence, and having saluted him duly, I told him these excellent words: "Whether thou art equal or superior to me, I will fight with thee, my virtuous preceptor, in battle. Bless me, wishing me victory." Hama, thus addressed, said, "He that desires prosperity should act even thus. They that fight with warriors more eminent than themselves have this duty to perform. I would have cursed thee if thou hadst not approached me thus. Go, fight, careful, and summoning all thy patience. I cannot wish thee victory, for I myself stand here to vanquish thee. Go, fight fairly. I am pleased with thy behavior." Bowing unto him, I then speedily came back, and mounting on my car, I once more blew my conch decked with gold, and then the combat commenced between him and me, and it lasted for many days, each of us having been desirous of vanquishing the other. And in that battle it was Hama who struck me first with 960 strength arrows furnished with vulturine wings. And with that arrowy shower my 4 steeds and charioteer were completely covered. Notwithstanding all this, I remained quiet in that encounter, accoutred in my coat of mail, bowing unto the gods, and especially unto the Brahmanas. Then smiling addressed Rama, stationed for battle, saying, "Although thou hast so little regard for me, yet I have full honored thy preceptorship. Listen again to some other auspicious duty that should be discharged if virtue is to be earned. The Vedas that are in thy body, and the high status of Brahmana that is in thee, and the ascetic merit thou hast earned by the severest of austerities. I do not strike at these, I strike at that Kshatriyahood which thou hast adopted. When a Brahmana taketh up weapons, he becometh a Kshatriya. Behold now the power of my bow and the energy of my arms. Speedily shall I cut off that bow of thine with a sharp shaft." Saying this, I shot at him a sharp broad-headed arrow, and cutting off one of the horns of his bow with it, I caused it to drop on the ground. I then shot at Jamadagni Kar 100 strength arrows, winged with vulturine feathers, piercing through Hama body and borne along by the wind. Those arrows, coursing through space, seemed to vomit blood, and resembled veritable snakes, covered all over with blood, and with blood issuing out of his body. Hama shone in battle like the Sumeru mountain, with streams of liquid metal rolling down its breast, or like the Asoka tree at the advent of spring when covered with head bunches of flowers, or like the King Suka tree when clad in its flowery attire. Taking up then another bow, Hama, filled with wrath, showered upon me numerous arrows of excessive sharpness, furnished with golden wings, and those fierce arrows of tremendous impetus, resembling snakes or fire or poison, coming at me from all sides, fixed my very vitals, and caused me to tremble. Summoning all my coolness, then I dressed myself for the encounter, and filled with rage, I pierced Hama with 100 arrows, and afflicted with those 100 blazing shafts, resembling either fire or the sun, or looking like snakes of virulent poison. Hama seemed to lose his senses. Filled with pity, I stopped of my own accord and said, Fie on Bailey, fie on Kishatria praxis, and overwhelmed with grief, I repeatedly said, Great is the sin committed by me through observance of Kishatria praxis. Since I have afflicted with arrows my preceptor, who is a Brahmana endowed with a virtuous soul. After that, I ceased striking Jamadagni's son any more. At this time, the thousand-rayed luminar, having heated the earth with his rays, proceeded at the close of day to his chambers in the west, and the battle between us ceased. Bhishma said, after the battle had ceased, Masharyatar, well skilled in such operations, drew out from his own body, from the bodies of my steeds, and from my body as well, the arrows that struck there. Next morning, when the sun rose, the battle commenced again, my horses having been buffeted and allowed to roll on the ground, and having had their thirst slaked and thereby invigorated, and beholding me coming quickly to the encounter, attired in a coat of mail, and stationed on my car, the Mike Hama equipped his car with great care. And I myself, beholding Hama coming towards me from the side of battle, placed aside my bow and quickly descended from my car. Saluting Hama, I ascended it, and desirous of giving battle, stood fearlessly before that son of Jamadagni. Then overwhelmed him with a thick shower of arrows, and he too covered me with an arrowy shower in return, and filled with wrath, Jamadagni's son once more shoot at me a number of fierce shafts of great force and blazing mouths, looking like veritable snakes, and shooting sharp shafts by hundreds and thousands, repeatedly cut off Hama arrows in mid-air before they could come at me. Then the mighty son of Jamadagni began to hurl celestial weapons at me, out of which I repelled, desirous of achieving mightier feats with my weapons. And loud was the din that then arose in the welkin all around. At that time I hurled at Hama the weapon named variaveis, which Hama neutralized, but the weapon called guhyaka. Then I applied with proper mantras the weapon called agneya, but the Lord Hama neutralized that weapon of mine by one called varuna. And it was in this way that I neutralized the celestial weapons of Hama, and that chastiser of foes, Hama, endowed with great energy, and acquainted with celestial weapons, neutralized the weapons shot by me. Then that best of Brahmanas, the mighty son of Jamadagni, filled with wrath, suddenly welling to my right, pierced me in the breast. At this I swooned on my best of cars, and beholding me, heft of consciousness, Masharyatar quickly bore me away from the field, and seeing me afflicted and pierced with hammer weapons, and blown away, dropping, and so on, all the followers of Hama, including Akritavrana and others, and the prince of Kasi, filled with joy, began to shout aloud, regaining consciousness. Then addressed my charioteer, saying, "Go where Hama stayeth. My pangs have left me, and I am ready for battle." Thus instructed my charioteer soon took me where Hama was, with the aid of those exceedingly handsome steeds of mine, that seemed to dance as they coursed, and that were ended with the speed of the wind. And approaching Hama then, and filled with wrath, from desire of vanquishing his angry self, overwhelmed him with an arrowy shower. But Hama, shooting 3 for every single of mine, cut into fragments every one of my strength-going arrows in the mid-air before any of them could reach him. And beholding those well-furnished arrows of mine by hundreds and thousands, each cut off in twain by Hama arrows, all the followers of Hama were filled with joy, impelled then by the desire of slaying him, shot at Hama, the son of Jamadagni, a good-looking arrow of blazing effulgence, with death self sitting at its head. He struck very forcibly therewith, and succumbing to its impetus, Hama fell into a swoon and dropped down on the ground. And when Hama thus dropped on the ground, exclamations of awe and alas arose on all sides, and the whole universe was filled with confusion and alarm, such as may be witnessed if the sun himself were ever to fall down from the firmament. Then all those ascetics, together with the prince of Kasi, quietly proceeded, with great anxiety, towards Hama, and, embracing him, they began to comfort him softly with the touch of their hands, rendered cold by contact with water, and with assurance of victory. Thus comforted, Hama rose up, and fixing an arrow to his bow, he addressed me in an agitated voice, saying, "Stay, thou art already slain," and let off by him that arrow quickly pierced my left side in that fierce encounter, and struck therewith. I began to tremble like a tree shaken by the tempest, slaying my horses. Then in terrific combat, Hama, fighting with great coolness, covered me with swarms of winged arrows, shot with remarkably lightness of hand. At these I also began to shoot arrows with great lightness of hand, for obstructing Hama arrowy shower. Then those arrows shot by myself and Hama, covering the welkin around, stayed even there, and thereupon, enveloped by clouds of arrows, the very sun could not shed its rays through them, and the very wind, obstructed by those clouds, seemed to be unable to pass through them. Then, in consequence of the obstructed motion of the wind, the rays of the sun, and the clash of the arrows against one another, a conflagration was caused in the welkin. And then those arrows blazed forth in consequence of the fire generated by themselves, and fell on the earth, consumed into ashes. Then Hama, filled with rage, covered me with hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands and hundreds millions of arrows. And I, with my arrows, resembling snakes of virulent poison, cut into fragments all those arrows of Hama, and caused them to fall down on the earth like snakes cut into pieces. And it was thus that combat took place. When, however, the shades of evening approached, my preceptor withdrew from the fight. Bhisma said, "The next day Frightful again was the combat that took place between me and Hama when I encountered him once more. That hero of virtuous soul, conversant with celestial weapons, the Lord Hama, from day to day began to use the best kinds of celestial weapons, regardless of life itself, which is so difficult of being sacrificed in that fierce combat. I baffled all those weapons with such of mine as are capable of baffling them, and when the best weapons were in this way neutralized and baffled by means of counter weapons, Hama of might energy began to contend against me in that battle, reckless of his own life. Seeing all his weapons baffled, the high-souled son of Jamadagin then hurled at me a fierce lance, blazing like a meteor, with flaming mouth, filling the whole earth, as it were, with its effusions, and resembling the dart hurled by Death himself. With my arrows cut into 3 fragments that blazing dart rushing against me, and resembling in effusions the sun that rises at the end of the Yuga. At these breezes, charged with fragrant odors, began to blow. Beholding that dart of his cut off, Hama, burning with anger, hurled a dozen other fierce darts. Their forms I am incapable of describing in consequence of their great efficiency and speed. How shall I describe their forms? Beholding those diverse-looking darts approach me from all sides, like long tongues of fire, and blazing forth with fierce energy, like the 1,000 suns that arise at the time of the destruction of the universe, I was filled with fear. Seeing an arrowy net advancing against me, I baffled it with an arrowy downpour of mine, and then sent 1,000 shafts, by which I consumed those fierce-looking 1,000 darts of Hama. Then the high-souled son of Jamadagni showered on me numerous fierce-looking darts, furnished with variegated handles decked with gold, possessed of golden wings, and resembling flaming meteors. Baffling those fierce darts by means of my shield and sword, and causing them in that combat to fall down on the ground, I then, with clouds of excellent arrows, covered Hama excellent steeds and his chariot. Then that high-souled Smita of the Lord of the High-Highest, beholding those darts of mine, equipped with gold-decked handles, and resembling snakes, emerged out of their holes, and filled with wrath at the sight, had recourse once more to celestial weapons. Then swarms of fierce arrows, looking like flights of locusts, fell upon me and overwhelmed me, and my steeds, and my chariot, and my car. My car, horses, and chariot were covered all over with those arrows, and the yoke, shaft, wheels, and the wheel spokes of my car, overwhelmed with that arrowy shower, at once broke. After that arrowy shower, however, was over, I covered my preceptor with a thick shower of arrows. Thereupon, that mass of Brahmic merit, mangled with that arrowy downpour, began to bleed copiously and continuously. Like Hama, afflicted with my clouds of arrows, I was densely pierced with his arrows. When, at last, in the evening, the sun set behind the western hills, our combat came to an end. Next morning, when the sun rose brightly, the combat between myself and him of vehicle haste again commenced. Then Hama, that foremost of smithers, stationed on his quickly moving car, rained on me a thick downpour of arrows like the clouds on the mountain breast. My beloved chariot, then afflicted by that arrowy shower, swerved from his place in the car, filling me with grief on his account. A total unconsciousness then came over him, and thus wounded by that arrowy downpour, he fell down upon the earth in a swoon, and a afflicted as he had been by Hama's shafts. He soon gave up his life. Then fear entered my heart, and when on the death of my charioteer I was still lamenting for him with hurt and injured by sorrow, Hama began to shoot at me men death-dealing shafts. Even when endangered at the death of my charioteer, I was lamenting for him. He of beherigal haste, drawing the bow with great strength, pierced me deep with an arrow. That blood-drinking shaft, falling upon my breast, pierced me through and fell simultaneously with my person upon the earth. Then, thinking I was dead, Hama repeatedly roared aloud like the clowns and rejoiced exceedingly. When thus I fell down on the earth, Hama, filled with joy, sent forth loud shouts along with his followers, while all the Kauravas who stood beside me and all those who came there to witness the combat were afflicted with great woe on seeing me fall. While lying prostrate, I beheld 8 Brahmanas, endowed with the effusions of the sun or the fire. They stood surrounding me on that field of battle, and supporting me on their arms. Borne up by those Brahmanas, I had not to touch the ground. Like friends, they supported me in mid-air, while I was breathing heavily, and they were sprinkling me with drops of water, and bearing me up as they stood. They then repeatedly said unto me, Do not fear, let prosperity be thine. Comforted then by those woes of theirs, I quickly rose up, and then I beheld my mother Ganga, that foremost of the rivers, stationed on my car. It was that great river gods who had controlled my steeds in the combat. Worshipping then the feet of my mother and of the spirits of my ancestors, I ascended my car. My mother then protected my car, the steeds, and all the implements of battle. With joined hands I entreated her to go away. Having dismissed her, I myself restrained those steeds, endowed with the speed of the wind, and fogged with Jamadagni's son, till the close of the day. Then, in course of that combat, I shot at Hama a powerful and hurt-piercing arrow, endowed with great speed. Afflicted with that shaft, Hama, then his bow loosened from his grasp, fell down upon the earth on his knees, heft of consciousness. And when Hama, that giver of many thousands, fell, masses of clouds covered the firmament, pouring a copious shower of blood, and meteors by hundreds fell, and thunder holes were heard, causing everything to tremble. And suddenly Hahu enveloped the blazing sun, and hog winds began to blow, and the earth itself began to tremble, and vultures and crows and cranes began to alight in joy, and the points of the horizon seemed to be ablaze, and jackals began to repeatedly to yell fiercely, and drums, unstruck, began to produce harsh sounds. When the high-souled Hama embraced the earth, heft of consciousness, all these frightful and alarming omens of evil were seen. Then all on a sudden, rising up, Hama approached me once more for battle, forgetting everything and deprived of his senses by anger. And that might-armed on took up his bow endowed with great strength, and also a deadly arrow. I, however, resisted him successfully. The great riches then were filled with pity at the sight, while he, of beherigal haste, was filled with great wrath. I then took up a shaft resembling the blazing fire that appears at the end of the Yuga, but Hama of immeasurably soul baffled that weapon of mine. Then covered by clouds of dust, the splendor of the solar disk was dimmed, and the sun went to the western mount, and night came with its delicious and cool breezes, and then both of us desisted from the fight. In this way, when evening came, the fierce battle ceased, and with the reappearance of the sun, it commenced again, and it lasted for 23 days together. Then, during the night, having bowed unto the Brahmanas, the rishis, the gods, and all those creatures that wander during the dark, and all the kings of the earth, I laid myself down on my bed, and in the solitude of my home I began to reflect in the following way. For many days have this fierce combat of terrible consequence lasted between myself and Jamadagni. I am unable to vanquish on the field of battle that hammer of might energy. If I am competent to vanquish in battle that Brahmana of might strength, Jamadagni's son of great prowess, then let the gods kindly show themselves to me this night. Mangled with arrows as I lay asleep that night on my right side, towards the morning, those foremost of Brahmanas who had raised me when I had fallen down from my car, and held me up, and said unto me, Do not fear, and who had comforted me, showed themselves to me in a dream, and they stood surrounding me, and said these words, Listen to them as I repeat them to thee. Rise, thou needst have no fear, we will protect thee, for thou art our own body. Hama, the son of Jamadagni, will never be able to vanquish thee in battle. Thou wilt be the conqueror of Hama in combat, this beloved weapon, called Prasvapa, appertaining to the Lord of all creatures, and forged by the divine artificer, will come to thy knowledge, for it was known to thee in thy former life. Neither Hama nor any person on earth is acquainted with it, recollected it, therefore, and apply it with strength. It will come to thee of itself. With it thou wilt be able to check all persons endowed with might energy. Hama will not be slain outright by it. Thou shalt not, therefore, incur any sin by using it. Afflicted by the force of this weapon, the son of Jamadagni will fall asleep. Vanquishing him thus, thou wilt again awaken him in battle. With that dear weapon called Samvodhihana, do what we have told thee. In the morning, stationed on thy car, asleep or dead, we reckon it as the same. Hama will not surely die. Apply, therefore, this Prasvapa weapon so happily talked of. Having said this, those foremost of Brahmanas, eight in number, and resembling one another in form, and possessed of efficient bodies, all vanished from my sight. After the night had passed away, I woke, and thinking of my dream, was filled with great joy. Then the combat began between him and me, a combat that was fierce and unrivaled, and that made the hairs of all creatures stand on their ends. And Viharagava poured on me an arrowy shower, which I baffled with an arrowy shower of mine. Then filled with wrath at what he had seen the day before, and what he saw that day, Hama hurled at me a dart, hard as in the thunderbolt, and possessed of effusions, resembling the Yama mace. It came towards me like a blazing flame of fire, and drinking up, as it were, all the quarters of that field of battle. Then it fell upon my shoulder, like the lightning flame that hangs the sky. Wounded thus by Hama, my blood began to flow copiously like streams of hot earth from a mountain. Filled with great wrath, then shot at Jamadagni's son, a deadly shaft, fatal as the poison of a snake. That heroic and best of Brahmanas struck therewith at the forehead, then appeared as beautiful as a crested hill. Extremely angry, that hero, then changing his position and drawing the bowstring with great strength, aimed at me a terrible shaft, resembling out destructive death himself, and capable of grinding our foes. That fierce arrow fell upon my breast, hissing like a snake. Covered with blood, I fell down on the earth, thus struck. Gaining consciousness, I hurled at Jamadagni's son a frightful dart, effulgent as the thunderbolt. That dart fell upon the bosom of that foremost of Brahmanas. Deprived of his senses at this, Hama began to tremble all over. The great ascetic, then his friend, the degenerate Akritavrana, embraced him, and with the vast words of comfort soothed him. He assured thus, Hama of high vows, was then filled with wrath and vindictiveness. He invoked the great Brahma weapon. For baffling it, used the same excellent weapon. Clashing against each other, the two weapons began to blaze forth brightly, showing what happens at the end of the Yuga. Without being able to reach either myself or Hama, those two weapons meet each other in the mid-air. Then the whole welcome seemed to be ablaze, and our creatures become highly distressed. Afflicted by the energy of those weapons, the rishis, the Gandharvas, and the gods were all greatly pained. Then earth, with her mountains, and seas, and trees, began to tremble, and our creatures, heated with the energy of the weapons, were greatly afflicted. The firmament became ablaze, and the 10 points of the horizon became filled with smoke. Creatures, therefore, that hence the walking were unable to stay in their element. When at all this, the whole world with the gods, the Asuras, and the Haksasas began to utter exclamations of war. This is the time talked and became desirous of speedily shouting the Prasvapa weapon at the command of those utterers of Brahma. The mantras for invoking excellent weapon suddenly came to my mind. When I had formed this resolution, a din of tumultuous voices arose in the sky, and it said, "Do not let off the Prasvapa weapon." Notwithstanding this, I still aimed that weapon of Pihirivu descendant. When I had aimed it, Narada addressed me, saying, "Yonder stay the gods in the sky, even they are forbidding thee today. Do not aim the Prasvapa weapon. Hama is an ascetic possessed of Brahman merit, and he is again thy preceptor." Never Kauravya humiliated him. While Narada was telling me this, I beheld those 8 utterers of Brahma stationed in the sky. Smiling, they said unto me slowly, "Do even what Narada saith. Even that is highly beneficial to the world." I then withdrew that great weapon called Prasvapa, and invoked, according to the ordinance, the weapon called Brahma in the combat. Beholding the Prasvapa weapon withdraw, Hama was in great wrath, and suddenly exclaimed, "Wretch that I am vanquished." Then Jamadagni's son, behold before him his venerable father of his father's fathers. They stood surrounding him there, and addressed him in these words of consolation. Never display such harshness again. the harshness of engaging in battle with vitima, or special with any kshatriya. To fight is the duty of a kshatriya. Stud and practice of vows are the highest wealth of Brahmanas. For some reason, before this, thou hast been ordered by us to take up weapons. Thou hast then perpetrated that terribly and unbecoming fiat. Let this battle with vitima be thy very last, for a nog of it thou hast already. Thou of might arms, leave the combat. Blessed be thou. Let this be the very last instance of thy taking up the bow. Throw thy bow aside, and practice ascetic austerities. Behold, vitima, the son of Santanu, is forbidden by all the gods. They are endeavoring to pacify him, repeatedly saying, desist from this battle. Do not fight with Hama, who is thy preceptor. It is not proper for thee to vanquish Hama in battle. Show this Brahmana every honor on the field of battle. As regards thee, we are thy superiors, and therefore forbid thee. Vitima is one of the foremost of Vasus. It is fortunate that thou art still alive. Santanu's son, Baganga, a celebrated Vasu as he is, how can he be defeated by thee? Desist. That foremost of the Pandavas, Arjuna, the mighty son of Indra, have been ordained by the self-create to be the slayer of Vitima. Thus addressed by his own ancestors, Hama answered them saying, I cannot give up the combat, even this is the solemn vow I have made. Before this I never left the field, giving up battle. Ye grandsires, if you please, cause Ganga's son to desist from the fight. As regards myself, I can by no means desist from the combat. Hearing these words of his, those ascetics with Hika at their head, coming to me with Narada in their company, told me, desist from battle. Honor that foremost of Brahmanas. For the sake of Kshatriya morality, I replied unto them, saying, even this is the vow I have taken in this world, that I won't never desist from battle, turning my back or super my back to be wounded with arrows. I cannot, from temptation or distress or fear, or for the sake of wealth, abandon my eternal duty. Even this is my fixed resolution. Then all those ascetics with Narada at their head, and my mother, Bihagihatihi, occupied the field of battle. I stayed quietly with arrows and bow as before, resolved to fight. They then once more turned towards Hama and addressed him, saying, the hearts of Brahmanas are made of butter. Be pacified. Desist from this battle. Vitima is incapable of being slain by thee, as thou art incapable of being slain by him. Saying these words while they stood obstructing the field, the Pitris caused that descendant of Hirigoheis to place aside his weapons. Just at this time, I once more beheld those 8 uteres of Brahma, blazing with effusions, and resembling bright stars rising on the firmament. Stationed for battle as I was, they said these words unto me with great affection. Go unto Hama, who is thy preceptor. Do what is beneficial to all the worlds. Beholding then that Hama had desisted owing to the words of his well-wishers, for the good of the world, accepted the words of my well-wishers. Thog mangled exceedingly, I still approached Hama and worshipped him. The great ascetic Hama then, smiling and with great affection, said unto me, there is no Kshatriya equal to thee on the earth. Go now, for in this combat thou hast pleased me highly. the morning then in my presence, that maiden, Viharagava, sorrowful, said unto her these words in the midst of all those high-souled persons. Hama said, in the very sight of all these persons, I have fought according to the best of my power, and displayed my prowess. By using even the very best of weapons, I have not been able to obtain an advantage over vitima, that foremost of all yielders of weapons. I have exerted now to the best of my power and might. Go whithersoever thou wishest. What other business of thine can I accomplish? Seek the protection of vitima himself. Thou hast no other refuge now. Soothing might weapons, vitima have vanquished me. Having said this, the high-souled Hama sighed and remained silent. That maiden then addressed him, saying, It is even so as thy whole self hath said. This vitima of great intelligence is incapable of being vanquished impatiently by even the gods. Thou hast done my business to the best of thy exertion and power. Thou hast displayed in this battle energy incapable of being baffled in weapons of diverse kinds. Thou hast yet been unable to obtain an advantage over vitima in combat. As regards myself, I will not go a second time to vitima. I will go thither, where I may myself slay vitima impatiently. Having said the words, that maiden went away, with eyes agitated with wrath, and thinking to compass my death, she firmly resolved to devote herself to asceticism. Then that foremost one of vehicle race, accompanied by those ascetics, bidding me farewell, departed for the mountains whence he had come. Ascending my car, and praised by the Brahmanas, entered our seat, and represented everything unto my mother Satyavati, everything that had transpired, and she uttered benedictions on me. Then appointed persons endowed with intelligence to ascertain the doings of that maiden, devoted to the good of myself, their well-wisher, those spies of mine, with great application, brought to me accounts of her course of action, her words and actions, from day to day. When that maiden went to the woods, resolved on ascetic austerities, even then I became melancholy and afflicted with pain. I lost my heart tenor, except one acquainted with Brahma and observant of vows that are praiseworthy owing to the austerities they involve. No Kshatriya hath ever by his prowess vanquished me impatiently. Then humbly presented to Narada as also to Vyasa all that the maiden did. They both told me, Do not give way to sorrow on account of the doctor of Kasi, who is there that would venture to baffle destiny by individual exertion. Meanwhile, that maiden, entering a cluster of Hydriads, practiced austerities that were beyond human powers, without food, emaciated, dry, with matted locks and begrimed with filth. For 6 months she lived on air only, and stood unmoved like a street post. And that lady, possessed of wealth of asceticism, foregoing all food in consequence of the fast she kept, passed a whole year after this, standing in the waters of the Yamuna, and with great wrath she passed the next whole year, standing on her front toes, and having eaten only on fallen leaf. And thus for 12 years she made the heavens hot by her austerities, and hog dissuaded by her relatives, she could not by any means be weaned off. She then went into Vatisabhumi, resorted to by the Siddhas and Kharanas, and which was the hytriot of high-souled ascetics of pious deeds, bathing frequently in the sacred waters of that hytriot, the prince of Kasi, who made about according to her will, proceeding next to the Asylum of Narada, and to the auspicious Asylum of Uluka, and to that of Hayavana, and to the spot sacred to Brahman, and to Prayaga, the sacrificial platform of the gods, and to that forest sacred to the gods, and to Vihogavati, and to the Asylum of Kusikason, and to the Asylum of Mandaviya, and also to the Asylum of Divilipa, and to Hamhada, and to the Asylum of Garga. The prince of Kasi performed ablutions in the sacred waters of all these, observing all the while the most difficult of vows. One day Mamada from the waters asked her, saying, "For what dost thou afflict thyself so? Tell me the truth." Thus asked, that faultless damsel answered her with joined hands, saying, "Hama hath been vanquished impately by Bihisma. What other king then would venture to defeat the latter when ready with his weapons? As regards myself, I am practicing the severest penances for the destruction of Bihisma. I wander over the earth, so that I may slay that king. In everything I do, even this is the great end of my vows." Hearing these words of hers, the ocean going replied unto her, saying, "Thou art acting crookedly. This wish of thine thou shalt not be able to achieve. Faultless one, if thou observest these vows for destruction of Bihisma, and if thou takest leave of thy body while observing them, thou shalt become a river, crooked in her course of water only during the rains. All the bathing places along thy course will be difficult of approach, and filled only during the rains. Thou shalt be dry for 8 months, full of terrible alligators, and creatures of frightful mien. Thou shalt inspire fear in all creatures." Addressing her thus, Mamada, that highly blessed lady, in seeming smiles, dismissed the prince of Kasi. That highly fair damsel then once more began to practice vows, foregoing all food, yea, even water, sometimes for 8 months, and sometimes for 10 months. And the daughter of the king of Kasi, wandering hither and thither for her passionate desire of Tirthihas, once more came back to Vatisabhumi. And it is there, Viharata, that she is known to have become a river, filled only during the rainy seasons, abounding with crocodiles, crooked in her course, and destitute of ears access to her water, and, in consequence of her ascetic merit, only half her body became such a river in Vatisabhumi, while with the other half she remained a maiden as before. Then all those ascetics, beholding the prince of Kasi firmly resolved on ascetic austerities, dissuaded her and inquired of her, saying, "What is thy business?" Thus addressed, the maiden answered those ascetics, old in ascetic penances, saying, "Expelled I have been by Bihisma, prevented by him from the virtue that would have been mine by living with a husband. My observance of these vows is for his destruction, and not for the sake of regions of bliss, ye that are endowed with wealth of asceticism. Having compassed the death of Bihisma, peace will be mine. Even this is my resolve. He for whom mine hath been this state of continuous grief, he for whom I have been deprived of the region that would have been mine if I could obtain a husband, he for whom I have become neither woman nor man. Without slaying impatiently that son of Ganga, I will not desist. Ye that are endowed with wealth of asceticism, even this that I have said is the purpose that is in my heart. As a woman, I have no longer any desire. I am resolved to obtain manhood, for I will be avenged upon Behisma. I should not, therefore, be dissuaded by you. Unto them she said these words repeatedly. Soon the divine lord of Uma, bearing the trident, showed himself in his own form unto that female ascetic in the midst of those great riches. Being asked to solicit the boon she wished, she begged of the deity Madifiet, thou shalt slay him, where the words the god said unto that lady of great force of mind. Thus assured the maiden once more said unto Hudra, how can it happen that being a woman I shall yet be able to achieve victory in battle? As a woman my heart is quite stilled. Thou hast promised me the defeat of Behisma, having the bull for thy mount. Act in such a way that promise of thine may become true, that encountering Behisma, the son of Santanu, impatiently I may be able to slay him, the god of gods, having the bull for his symbol. Then said unto that maiden, the words I have uttered cannot be false, true they will be. Thou shalt slay Behisma, and even obtain manhood. Thou shalt remember all the incidents, even when thou shalt obtain a new body. Born in the haze of Drupada, thou shalt become a Mahahatha, quick in the use of weapons, and a fierce warrior. Thou shalt be well skilled in battle. All that I have said will be true. Thou shalt become a man at the expiration of some time. Having said so, the god of gods called also Kapardin, having the bull for his symbol, disappeared then and there in the very sight of those Brahmanas. Upon this, that faultless maiden of the fairest complexion, the eldest daughter of the king of Kasi, procuring wood from that forest in the very light of those great riches, made a large funeral pyre on the banks of the Yamuna, and having set fire to it herself, entered that blazing fire, with a heart burning with wrath, and uttering the words, for Behisma destruction. Duryodhana said, tell me how Sikhihanding, having before been born a doctor, afterwards became a man. Behisma said, the else and beloved queen of King Drupada was childless. During those years, King Drupada paid his adoration to the god Sankara for the sake of offspring, resolving in his mind to compass my destruction and practicing the austerest of penances. And he begged Mahadeva, saying, let a son and not a daughter be born unto me. I desire a son for avenging myself upon Behisma. Thereupon that god of gods said unto him, thou shalt have a child who will be a female and male. Desist, it will not be otherwise. Returning then to his capital, he addressed his wife, saying, great have been the exertion made by me, undergoing ascetic austerities, I paid my adorations to Siva, and I was told by Sambihu that my child, becoming a doctor, would subsequently become a male person, and Tog solicited him repeatedly, yet Siva said, this is destiny decree, it will not be otherwise. That which is destined must take place, Then that lady of great energy, the queen of King Drupada, when her season came, observing all the regulations, approached Drupada. And in due time the wife of Prishata conceived, agreeably to destiny decree, as I was informed by Narada. And that lady of eyes like lotus petals continued to hold the embryo in her womb, and the might-armed King Drupada, from paternal affection, attended to every comfort of that dear wife of his, and the wife of that lord of earth, the royal Drupada, who was shieldless, had all her wishes gratified, and in due time that gods, the queen of Drupada, gave birth to a daughter of great beauty. Thereupon the strong-minded wife of that king, the childless Drupada, gave out that the child she had brought forth was a son, and then King Drupada caused all the rites prescribed for a male child to be performed in respect of that misrepresented daughter, as if she were really a son, and saying that the child was a son. Drupada queen kept her counsels very carefully, and no other man in the seat save Prishata knew the sex of that child, believing these woes of that deity of unfading energy. He concealed the real sex of his child, saying, "She is a son." And Drupada caused all the rites of infants prescribed for a son to be performed in respect of that child, and he bestowed the name of Sikhihanding on her. I alone, through my spies and from Narada words, knew the truth, informed as I previously was of the woes of the god, and of the ascetic austerities of Amba. Bhisma said, Drupada bestowed great attention on everything in connection with that daughter of his, teaching her reading and painting and all the arts, and in arrows and weapons that child became a disciple of Drona, and the child mother of superior complexion then urged the king to find a wife for her, as if she were a son. Then Prishata, beholding that daughter of his to have attained the full development of youth, and assured of her sex, began to consult with his queen. And Drupada said, "This daughter of mine, that so enhanceth my war, hath attained her youth, concealed, however she hath hitherto been by me at the walls of the trident-bearing deity." The queen replied, "That can never be untrue. Why, and the Lord of the three worlds say that would not occur. If it pleases thee, I will speak and listen to my words, and having listened to me, follow thy own inclination. Let the wedding of this child with a wife be caused to be performed carefully. The words of that god will be true. This is my certain belief." Then that royal couple, having settled their resolution of that affair, chose the daughter of the king of the Dasahanas as their son wife. After this, the royal Drupada, that lie among kings, having inquired about the purity of the scent of all the rulers of the earth, selected the daughter of the king of Dasarnakas for wife to Sikhihanding. He who was called king of the Dasarnakas was named Hiranyavarman, and he gave away his daughter to Sikhihanding, and Hiranyavarman, the king of the Dasarnakas, was a powerful monarch, incapable of being easily vanquished, incapable of being resisted. That high-souled monarch possessed a large arm, and sometimes after the wedding, the daughter of Hiranyavarman attained her youth, while the daughter of Drupada also had attained hers. And Sikhi after marriage, came back to Campilia, and the former soon came to know that the latter was a woman like herself, and the doctor of Hiranyavarman, having ascertained that Sikhi was real a woman, bashful, presented unto her nurses and companions everything about the so-called son of the king of the Pankhalas. Then those nurses of the Dasarna country were filled with great grief and sent emissaries unto their king. And those emissaries represented unto the king of the Dasarnas everything about the imposture that had taken place. And thereupon the king of the Dasarnas was filled with wrath. Hiranyavarman, hearing the news after the expire of a few days, was much afflicted with wrath. The ruler of the Dasarnakas, then filled with fierce wrath, sent a messenger to Drupada abode. And the messenger of King Hiranyavarman, having alone approached Drupada, took him aside and said unto him in private, the king of the Dasarnas, deceived by thee and enraged at the suit thou hast offered him, have said these words unto thee. Thou hast humiliated me, without doubt it was not wisely done by thee. Thou hast from fall solicited my doctor for thy doctor. Hear now the consequence of that act of deception. I will now slay thee with all thy relatives and advisers. Wait a little. Thus arrested by that messenger, King Drupada, like a thief caught, could not speak. He exerted himself greatly by sending sweet-speeched emissaries of his own instruction, them to say, "This is not so," in order to pacify his brother. King Hiranyavarman, however, ascertaining once again that the child of the king of the Pankhalas was real a doctor, issued out of his seat without losing any time. He then sent messages unto all these powerful friends about that deception practiced on his doctor, of which he had heard from her nurses. Then that best of kings, having mustered a large arm, resolved to march against Drupada. Then King Hiranyavarman held a consultation with his ministers about the ruler of the Pankhalas, and it was settled among those high-souled kings that, if Sikhi was real a doctor, they should bind the ruler of the Pankhalas and drag him from his seat, and installing another king over the Pankhalas, they should slay Drupada with Sikhi. Taking that to be the fixed resolution, King Hiranyavarman once more sent an envoy to the descendant of Prishata, saying, "I will slay thee, be calm." King Drupada was not naturally courageous. In consequence, again, of that offense of his, he became filled with fear, sending his voice again to the ruler of the Dasarnas. King Drupada, afflicted with grief, approached his wife and took counsel with her. And possessed with great fright and with heart afflicted with grief, the king of the Pankhalas said unto his favorite wife, the mother of Sikhi, these words: "My powerful brother, King Hiranyavarman, having mustered a large force, is coming towards me in anger. Fools that we both are, what are we now to do in respect of this our doctor? Thy son, Sikhi, hath been suspected to be a doctor. Under this suspicion, Hiranyavarman, with his allies and followed by his arm, wisheth to slay me, thinking that he hath been deceived by me. Tell us now what is true or false in this. Hearing from thee first, I will settle how to act. I am very much endangered, and this child, Sikhi, also is equally so. Thou art threatened with danger. For the relief of all, tell me who asketh thee what the truth is." thou of beautiful hips and sweet smiles, hearing what thou hast to say, thou shalt act suitably. O talk, I have been deceived by thee as to the duties I owe towards a son, yet from kindness I will act towards you both in a suitably manner. Therefore, do not fear, nor let this doctor of thine fear anything. I have deceived the king of the Dasarnas. Tell me, how may I act towards him so that I may yet turn up well? Our talk, the king knew everything, yet he addressed his wife in the presence of others in this way, to proclaim his own innocence before others. His queen then answered him in the following words. Then Sikhihanding mother presented unto her lord the truth about her daughter Sikhihanding, and she said, shieldless as I was from fear of my co-wives, when Sikhihanding my daughter was born, presented unto you that it was a son. For thy love of me thou also hast corroborated it, and thou hast performed all the rites prescribed for a son in respect of this daughter of mine. Thou then didst marry her to the daughter of the king of the Dasarnas. I approved of this act, remembering the words of the god. I did not prevent it, remembering the words of Shiva. Born a daughter, she will become a son. Hearing all this, Drupada, otherwise called Yajinasena, informed all his councillors of these facts, and the king then took counsel with ministers for the proper protection of his subjects. Although he had himself deceived the king of the Dasarnas, yet giving it out that the alliance he had made was proper, he began to settle his plans with undivided attention. King Drupada's seat was naturally well protected, yet at the advent of danger they began to protect it all the more careful and fortify it. The king, however, with his queen, was greatly afflicted, thinking of how a war might not take place with his brother. Reflecting on this, he began to pay his adorations to the gods. His respected wife, beholding him relying on the god and paying his adorations to them, then addressed him and said, homage to the gods is productive of benefits. It is, therefore, approved by the righteous. What shall I say again of those that are sunk in an ocean of distress? Therefore, pay homage to those that are thy superiors, and let all the gods be worshipped, making lavish presents the while. Let oblations be poured on the fire for pacifying the ruler of the Dasarnas. Think of the means by which, without a war, thou mayest be able to pacify thy brother. Through the grace of the gods, all these will happen. For the preservation of this seat, thou hast taken counsel with thy ministers. Do all that those counsels seem to indicate, for reliance on the gods, when supported by human exertion, always leadeth to success. If these two do not go hand in hand, success becometh unattainable. Therefore, with all thy advisers, make such arrangements in thy seat as are proper, and pay homage as thou pleasest to the gods. While husband and wife were conversing with each other thus, both filled with grief, their helpless daughter Sikhihandini was filled with shame. She then reflected, saying, it is for me that these two are plunged into grief. Thinking so, she resolved upon putting an end to her own life. Having formed this determination, she left home, filled with heavy sorrow, and went into a dense and solitary forest that was the haunt of a very formidable Yakisha called Sitihunakarna. From fear of that Yakisha, men never went into that forest, and within it stood a mansion with high walls, and a gateway, plastered over with powder red earth, and rich with smoke bearing the fragrance of freed paddy. Entering that mansion, Sikhihandini, the doctor of Drupada, began to reduce herself by foregoing our food for many days. Thereupon the Yakisha named Sitihunakarna, who was endowed with kindness, showed himself unto her. And he inquired of her, saying, For what object is this endeavour of thine? I will accomplish it. Tell me without delay. Thus asked, the maiden answered him repeatedly, saying, Thou art unable to accomplish it. The Guhyaka, however, rejoined, without a moment delay, saying, Accomplish it, I will. I am a follower of the Lord of Treasuries. I can grant boons. I will grant thee even that which cannot be given. Tell me what thou hast to say. Thus assured, Sikhihandini represented in detail everything that had happened unto that chief of Yakishas, called Sitihunakarna, and she said, My father will soon meet with destruction. The ruler of the Dasarnas marcheth against him in haste. That king, cased in golden mail, is endowed with great might and great courage. Therefore, save me, my mother, and my father. Thou hast already pledged thyself to relieve my distress. Through thy grace, I would become a perfect man. As long as that king may not depart from my seat, so long show me grace. Hearing those words of Sikhihandini, afflicted by destiny, that Yakisha said, after reflecting in his mind these words, It was ordained to be so, and it was ordained for my grief. The Yakisha said, Blessed lady, I will certainly do what thou wishest. Listen to the condition I make. For a certain period I will give thee my manhood. Thou must, however, come back to me in due time. Pledge thyself to do so. Possessed of immense power, I am a ranger of the skies, wandering at my pleasure, and capable of accomplishing whatever I intend. Through my grace, save the city and thy kinsmen unholy. I will bear thy womanhood. Pledge thy truth to me. I will do what is agreeable to thee. Thus addressed, Sikhihandini said unto him, I will give thee back thy manhood. Bear thou my womanhood for a short time. After the ruler of the Dasarnas, who is cased in a golden mail, will have departed, I will once more become a maiden, and thou wilt become a man. Having said this, they both made a covenant, and imparted unto each other body their sexes, and the Yakisha Sitihuna became a female, while Sikhihandini obtained the blazing form of the Yakisha. Then Sikhihandini of Pankhalahes, having obtained manhood, entered his seat in great joy, and approached his father. And he represented unto Drupada everything that had happened. And Drupada, hearing it all, became highly glad, and along with his wife the king recollected the words of Mahesvara, and he forthwith sent messenger unto the ruler of the Dasarnas, saying, This my child is a male, let it be believed by thee. The king of the Dasarnakas, meanwhile, filled with sorrow and grief, suddenly approached Drupada, the ruler of the Pankhalas, and arrived at Campilia. The Dasarna king dispatched, after paying him proper honors, an envoy who was one of the foremost of those conversant with the Vedas. And he addressed the envoy, saying, Instructed by me, say unto that worst of kings, the ruler of the Pankhalas, these words, Thou of wicked understanding, having selected my daughter as a wife for one who is thy daughter, thou shalt today, without doubt, behold the fruit of that act of deception. Thus addressed and dispatched by him, the Brahmana set out for Drupada's seat as Dasarna envoy, and having arrived at the seat, the priest went into Drupada's presence. The king of the Pankhalas then, with Sikhihanding, offered the envoy a cow and honey. The Brahmana, however, without accepting that worship, said unto him these words that had been communicated through him by the brave ruler of the Dasarnas, who was cased in a golden mail. And he said, Thou of vile behaviors, I have been deceived by thee through thy doctor. I will exterminate thee with thy counselors, and sons and kinsmen. Having in the midst of his counselors been made by that priest to hear those words fraught with censure and uttered by the ruler of the Dasarnas, King Drupada then, assuming a mild behavior from motives of friendship, said, The reply to these words of my brother that thou hast said unto me will be carried to that monarch by my envoy. And King Drupada then sent unto the high-souled Hiranyavarman, a Brahmana, learned in the Vedas, as his envoy. And that envoy, going unto King Hiranyavarman, the ruler of the Dasarnas, said unto him the word that Drupada had entrusted him with. And he said, This Messiah is real a male. Let it be made clear by means of witness. Somebody has spoken falsely to thee. That should not be believed. Then the king of the Dasarnas, having heard the words of Drupada, was filled with sorrow, and dispatched a number of young ladies of great beauty for ascertaining whether Sikhihanding was a male or female. Dispatched by him, those ladies, having ascertained, joyful told the king of the Dasarnas everything, that Sikhihanding was a powerful person of the masculine sex. Hearing that testimony, the ruler of the Dasarnas was filled with great joy, and wending then unto his brother Drupada, passed a few days with him in joy, and the king, rejoiced as he was, gave unto Sikhihanding much wealth, many elephants, and steeds, and kine. And worshipped by Drupada, the Dasarna king then departed, having rebuked his daughter. And after King Hiranyavarman, the ruler of the Dasarnas, had departed in joy, and with his anger quelled, Sikhihanding began to rejoice exceedingly. Meanwhile, some time after, Kuvera, who was always borne on the shoulders of human beings, in course of a journey through the earth, came to the abode of Sitihuna. Staying above that mansion, the protector of all the treasuries saw that the excellent abode of the Yakisha Sitihuna was well adorned with beautiful garlands of flowers, and perfumed with fragrant hoods of grass and many sweet scent, and it was decked with canopies and scented incense. And it was beautiful with standards and banners, and it was filled with edibles and drink of every kind. And beholding that beautiful abode of the Yakisha, decked all over, and filled with garlands of dews and jams, and perfumed with the fragrance of the best kinds of flowers, and well watered, and well swept, the lord of the Yakishas addressed the Yakishas that followed him, saying, Ye that are endowed with immeasurable prowess, this mansion of Sitihuna is well adorned. Why, however, doth not that wicked of wicked understanding come to me, and sighs that wicked souled on, knowing I am here, approacheth me not. Therefore, some severe punishment should be inflicted on him. Even this is my intention. Hearing these words of his, the Yakishas said, the royal Drupada had a daughter born unto him of the name of Sikhihandini. Unto her, for some reason, Siddhihuna had given his own manhood, and having taken her womanhood upon him, he stayeth within his abode, having become a woman. Bearing as he doth a feminine form, he doth not, therefore, approach thee in shame. It is for this reason that Siddhihuna cometh not to thee. Hearing out these, do what may be proper. Let the car be stopped here. Let Siddhihuna be brought to me, where the words that the Lord of Yakishas uttered, and he repeatedly said, I will punish him. Summoned then by the Lord of Yakishas, Siddhihuna, bearing a feminine form, came thither, and stood before him in shame. Then the giver of wealth cursed him in anger, saying, Ye Guhyakas, let the feminine wretch remain as it is. And the high-souled Lord of the Yakishas said, Since humiliating all the Yakishas thou hast, thou of sinful deeds, given away thy own sex to Sikhihandini, and taken from her femininity. Since, wicked wretch, thou hast done what hath never been done by anybody. Therefore, from this day thou shalt remain a woman, and she shall remain a man. At these words of his, all the Yakishas began to soften Vaisravana for the sake of Siddhihuna Karna, repeatedly saying, Set a limit to thy course. The high-souled Lord of the Yakishas then said unto all these Yakishas that followed him, from desire of setting a limit to his course, these words, After Sikhihandin death, ye Yakishas, this own will regain his own form. Therefore, let this high-souled Yakisha, Siddhihuna, be freed from his anxiety. Having said this, the illustrious and divine king of the Yakishas, as having do worship, departed with all his followers, who were capable of traversing a great distance within the shortest space of time. And Siddhihuna, with that curse pronounced on him, continued to live there. And when the time came, Sikhihandin, without losing a moment, came unto that wanderer of the night, and approaching his presence, he said, I have come to thee. Siddhihuna then repeatedly said unto him, I am pleased with thee. Beholding that prince returned to him without guile, Siddhihuna told Sikhihandin everything that had happened. The Yakisha said, For thee I have been cursed by Vaisravana. Go now and live happily amongst men as thou choosest. Thy coming here and the arrival of Pulastia's son were, I think, both ordained from beforehand. All this was incapable of being prevented. Thus addressed by the Yakisha, Siddhihuna, Sikhihandin came to his seat, filled with great joy, and he worshipped with diverse scents and garlands of flowers and costly presents persons of the regenerate class, deities, big trees, and crossways, and Drupada, the ruler of the Pankhalas, along with his son Sikhihandin, whose wishes had been crowned with success, and with his kinsmen, became exceedingly glad. And the king then gave his son Sikhihandin, who had been a woman, as a pupil to Drona. And Prince Sikhihandin obtained, along with yourselves, the whole science of arms with its 4 divisions, and the Hiristariumna of Prishata race obtained the same. This was represented unto me by the spies disguised as idiots, and as persons without the senses of vision and hearing whom I had set upon Drupada. It is thus that the best of Hatihas, Sikhihanding, the son of Drupada, having first been born a female, subsequently became a person of the other sex, and it was the else daughter of the ruler of Kasi, celebrated by the name of Amba, who was born in Drupada line as Sikhihanding. If he approacheth me, bow in hand, and desirous of fighting, I will not look at him even for a moment, nor smite him. Even this is my vow, no over other word, that I will not shoot weapons upon a woman, or on that was a woman before, or on bearing a feminine name, or on whose form resembleth a woman. I will not, for this reason, slay Sikhihanding. Even this is the history that I have ascertained of Sikhihanding birth. I will not, therefore, slay him impately, even if he approacheth me, weapon in hand. If Vitima slayeth a woman, the righteous will always speak ill of him. I will not slay him even if I behold him waiting for battle. Hearing these words of Vitima, King Duryodhana of Kuru haste, reflecting for a moment, thought that even that behavior was proper for Vitima. Sanjaya said, when the night passed away and the morning came, thy sons once more, in the midst of all the troops, asked their grandsire, saying, this arm that is ready for fight of Pandu's son, that abounds with men, elephants, and steeds, that is clothed with Mahabharata, that is protected by these mighty bowmen, and that with great strength, Bhima and Arjuna, and others headed by Dhritarashtra, and are assembling the variations of the world, that is invincibly and incapable of being withstood, that assembles the unbounded seer, the seer of warriors, incapable of being agitated by the very gods in battle. In how many days canst thou annihilate it? And in what time can that mighty bowman or preceptor, in what time the mighty creeper, in what time Karna, who taketh a pleasure in battle, and in what time that best of Brahmanas, the son of Drona, can each annihilate it? Ye that are in my arm are all acquainted with celestial weapons. I desire to know this, for the curiosity I feel in my heart is great. Thou of mighty arms, it behoveth thee to say this to me. Vitima said, thou inquirest about the strength and weakness of the foe. This is worthy of thee. Listen as I tell thee the utmost limit of my power in battle, or of the energy of my weapons, or of the might of my arms. As regards ordinary combatants, one should fight with them artlessly. As regards those that are possessed of powers of deception, one should fight with them aided by the ways of deception. Even this is what hath been laid down in respect of the duties of warriors. I can annihilate the Pandava army, taking every morning 10,000 warriors and 1,000 car warriors as my share from day to day, cased in mail, and always exerting myself actively. I can annihilate this large force according to this arrangement as regards both number and time. If stationed in battle, I shoot my great weapons that stay hundreds and thousands at a time. Then I can finish this slaughter in a month. Hearing these words of Vitima, King Duryodhana then asked Drona, that foremost on of angry race, saying, in what time canst thou annihilate the troops of Pandu's son? Thus addressed by him, Drona said, smiling, I am old, my energy and activity have both become weak, with the fire of my weapons, I can consume the arm of the Pandavas like Santanu son, Bhisma. I think in a month's time. Even this is the limit of my power. Even this is the limit of my strength. Then Saradevat son, Kripa, said that he could annihilate the foe in 2 months' time. Drona son pledged himself to annihilate the Pandava arm in 10 nights. Karna, however, acquainted as he was with weapons of high efficacy, pledged himself to achieve that feat in 5 days. Hearing the words of the Suta son, the son of the ocean-going, Loghead aloud and said, "As long as thou encounterest not impately Partha with his arrows, conch, and bows, and rushing to the combat on his car with Vasudeva in his company, so long mayest thou think so. Why, thou art capable of saying anything, even what thou pleasest." Vaisampayana said, hearing these words, Kunti's son, Yudhishthira, summoning all his brothers, said unto them these words in private. Yudhishthira said, "The spies I had placed in the arm of Dhritarashtra's son brought me this news in the morning." Duryodhana asked Ganga son of great vows, saying, "In what time canst thou annihilate the troops of Pandu's sons?" The wicked Duryodhana was answered by him in these words, "In a month." Drona declared that he could do the same feat in about the same time. Gautama indicated twice that period, as have been heard by us. Drona's son, acquainted with weapons of high efficacy, declared the period to be 10 nights. Karna, acquainted with weapons of high efficacy, asked in the midst of the Kurus, declared that he could complete this slaughter in 5 days. Therefore, I am desirous of hearing thy words. In what time canst thou exterminate the foe? Thus addressed by the king, the Dhananjaya of curly hair, casting a look upon Vasudeva, said these words, "These are high-souled, accomplished in arms, and acquainted with all modes of warfare. Without doubt, they can exterminate even thus. Let thy heart anguish be dispelled. I tell thee truly that with Vasudeva as my ally, I can, on a single car, exterminate the 3 worlds with even the immortals. Our mobly creatures that were, are, will be in the twinkling of the eye. This is what I think. That terribly and mighty weapon which the Lord of all creatures gave me on the occasion of my hand-to-hand encounter with him. A hunter still existeth with me. That weapon which the Lord of all creatures useth at the end of Yuga for destroying created things existeth with me. Ganga son knoweth not that weapon, nor Drona, nor Gautama, nor Drona's son. How can the Suta's son know it? It is not proper to slay ordinary men impatedly by means of celestial weapons. We shall vanquish our foes in a fair fight. Then these tigers among men are thy allies. All of them are well vested in celestial weapons, and all of them are eager for battle. All of them, after their initiation in the Vedas, have undergone the final bath in sacrifices. All of them are unvanquished. They are competent to slay impatedly the arm of even the celestials. Thou hast for thy allies Sikhihandin, and Yuyudhihana, and Dhritarhyumna of Prishatha race, and Bhishmasena, and these twins, and Yudhihamanu, and Utamaujas, and Virata, and Drupada, who are equal impatedly unto Bhisma and Drona, and the might-armed Sankhiha, and Hiringva son of great might, and this later son, Anjan Parvan, and with great strength and prowess, and Sini descendant of might arms and well versed in battle, and the might Abhimanyu, and the 5 sons of Draupadi. Thou art thyself again competent to exterminate the 3 worlds. Thou that art endowed with effusions equal unto that of Sakra himself. I know it, for it is manifest, that man upon whom thou mayest cast thy eyes in anger is sure to be annihilated. Vaisampayana said. Next morning, under a cloudless sky, all the kings, urged by the Dhritarashtra son, Duryodhana, set out against the Pandavas, and all of them had purified themselves by baths, were decked in garlands, and attired in white robes, and having poured libations on fire, caused Brahmanas to utter benedictions on them. They took up their weapons and raised their standards, and all of them were conversant with the Vedas, and endowed with great bravery, and had practiced excellent vows. All of them were grantors of wishes, and all were skilled in battle. And with great strength they set out, reposing confidence on another, and with singleness of purpose, desiring to win in battle the Reichs regions, and first Vinda and Anuvinda, both of Avanti and Kekayas, and the Valhikas, are set out with Biharadivaja son at their head. Then came Asvatihaman and Santanu son, and Jayadratha of the country of the Sindhu, and the kings of the southern and the western countries, and of the hill regions, and Sakuni, the ruler of the Gandhiharas, and all the chiefs of the eastern and the northern regions, and the Sakas, the Kiratas, and Yavanas, the Sivis, and the Vasatis, with their Mahahatihas at the heads of their respective divisions. All these great cow warriors marched in the 2nd division. Then came Kritavarman at the head of his troops, and that might cow warrior, the ruler of the Trigartas, and the king Duryodhana, surrounded by his brothers, and Sala, and Bihu his Ravas, and Salia, and Vrihadaratha, the ruler of the Kosalas. These all marched in the rear, with the Dhritarashtra sons at their head, and all these the Dhritarashtras, and with great might, united together in proper order, and all clad in mail, took up their position at the other end of Kurukshetra, and Duryodhana caused his encampment to be so adorned as to make it look like a second Hastinapura. Even those that were clever among the citizens of Hastinapura could not distinguish their seat from the encampment, and the Kuru king caused inaccessible pavilions similar to his own to be erected by hundreds and thousands for the kings, and those tents for the accommodation of the troops were well planted on an area measuring full 5 yojanas of that field of battle. And into those tents battalions that were full of provisions, the rulers of the earth entered, each according to his courage, according to the strength he possessed. And King Duryodhana ordered excellent provisions to be supplied for all those high-souled kings with their troops, consisting of infantry, elephants, and horses, and with all their followers. And as regards all those that subsisted upon mechanical arts, and all the bards, singers, and panegyrists, devoted to his cause, and vendors, and traders, and prostitutes, and spies, and persons who had come to witness the battle, the Kuru king made due provision for all of them. Vaisampayana said, like Duryodhana, King Yudhishthira also, the son of Kunti, and the Dharma, ordered out his heroic warriors headed by Dhristadyumna. he ordered that slayer of foes and commander of force, that leader, steered in prowess of the heads, the cassis, and the carousas, the hiris taketu, as also virata, and drupada, and yuyudihana, and sikihanding, and those two mighty bowmen, those two princes of Pankhala, Yudhihamaniu and Utamaushas, to set out. Those brave warriors, cased in handsome coats of mail, and decked with golden earrings, blazed forth like fires on the sacrificial altar when fed with clarified butter. Those mighty bowmen looked resplendent like the planets in the firmament. Then that bow among men, King Yudhishthira, having duly honored all his combatants, ordered them to march. And King Yudhishthira ordered excellent provisions of food for those high-souled kings with their troops, consisting of infantry, and elephants, and horses, and with all their followers, as also for all those that subsisted on mechanical arts. And the son of Pandu first ordered Abhimanyu and Vrihanta and the 5 sons of Draupadi to march with Dhritarhyumna at their head, and he then dispatched Bhishma and Dhananjaya, the son of Pandu, in the 2nd division of his forces, and the ring made by the men moving and running about for harnessing their steeds and elephants, and loading the cars with implements of battle, and the shouts of the cheerful combatants seemed to touch the very heavens. And last of all, the king marched himself, accompanied by Virata and Drupada and the other monarchs. And that arm of his bowmen, commanded by Dhritarhyumna, hitherto stationed in one place, but now extended into columns for marching, looked like the current of Ganga. The intelligent Yudhishthira, depending on his wisdom, disposed his divisions in a different order, confounding the sons of Dhritarashtra, and the son of Pandu ordered that those mighty bowmen, the sons of Draupadi, and Abhimanyu, and Nakula, and Sahadeva, and all the Prabhihadarakas, and 10,000 horses, and 2,000 elephants, and 10,000 foot soldiers, and 500 cars, constituting the first irresistible division of his arm, should be placed under the command of Bhimasena. And he placed in the middle division of his arm Virata and Jayatisena, and those 2 mighty warriors, Yudhihamaniu and Utamauja, the 2 high-souled princes of Pankhala, both endowed with great prowess, and both armed with mace and bow. And in this middle division marched Vasudeva and Dhananjaya. There were combatants highly accomplished in arms and burning with anger. Amongst them were steeds ridden by brave warriors, and 5,000 elephants, and crews of cars all around, and foot soldiers in thousands, that were all brave and armed with bows, swords, and maces, marched behind them, as thousands marched before them. And in that part of that sea of troops where Yudhishthira himself was, there were stationed numerous lords of earth, and there were thousands of elephants, and steeds by 10,000s, and cars and foot soldiers by thousands, and there marched Hekitana with his own large force, and King Dhristaketu, the leader of the heads. And there was that mighty bowman, Satyaki, the foremost warrior of the Vrishnis, that mighty combatant, surrounded by hundreds and thousands of cars and leading. And those bow among men, Kishatrahan and Kishatradeva, mounted on their cars, marched behind, protecting the rear. And there were the wagons, stalls, uniforms, vehicles and draft animals. There were thousands of elephants and horses, by tens of thousands. And taking all the invalids and women, and all that were emaciated and weak, and all the animals carrying his treasuries, and all his granaries, with the aid of his elephant divisions, Yudhishthira marched slowly, and he was followed by Saukhitri, who steadily adhered to truth and was invincibly impatient, and Srilimat, and Vasudeva, and Vibhu, the son of the ruler of Kasi, with 20,000 cars, and 100 million steeds of high mettle, each bearing scores of bells on its limbs, and 20,000 smithing elephants with tusks as long as plowshares, are of good breed and of divided temples, and are assembling moving masses of clowns. These usually walked behind those monarchs. Besides these, the elephants that Yudhishthira had in his 7 Akishauhinis, numbering 70,000, with more trickling down their trunks and from their mouths, and assembling showering clowns, followed the king like moving hues. Thus was arrayed that terrible force of the intelligent son of Kunti, and relying upon that force he battled with Suyodhana, the son of Dhritarashtra. Besides those already named, other men by hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands, in divisions numbering by thousands, followed, roaring loudly, and the warriors by thousands and 10,000s, filled with joy, beat their drums by thousands, and blew conches by tens of thousands.